Good night. Sweet dreams. That's what my dad would say to me. But sometimes I had trouble falling asleep. Then he would tell me stories about his travels. I want this tradition to live on. So now, let me share my stories with you. Long before sunrise reaches the Himalayas, there is already movement in the darkness. At first, it is only small sounds. The soft scrape of boots somewhere below the floorboards, the distant clink of metal from the tea-house kitchen, a kettle lid rattling gently, wind brushing against prayer flags outside with a dry whispering sound. Then comes a careful knock at the wooden door. "Good morning," says Lhakpa softly. His voice carries through the cold room like something warm. For a moment, I remain buried deep inside my sleeping bag, listening to the silence around me. The lodge is still dark. Only a faint silver glow leaks around the curtains. The air is cold enough that my breath drifts pale through the room. Vacation is supposed to mean sleeping late. No alarms, no schedules, no rushing through half-awake mornings while the world demands your attention before your mind has fully arrived. At home, mornings often feel borrowed from someone else. But here, on the Annapurna Circuit, mornings belong to the mountains. And the mountains wake early. Slowly, I sit upright, still wrapped in warmth. Outside, somewhere in the village, a dog barks once and then falls silent again. The sound disappears quickly into the vastness of the Himalayas. I switch on my headlamp and begin dressing layer by layer. Thermal clothing, heavy trekking pants, thick wool socks, a faded down jacket carrying dust from the trail. Beside the bed sit my trekking boots, solid and dependable, their metal hooks catching the dim light. Next to them leans my bamboo walking stick. When I bought it in Kathmandu, I worried it might look theatrical somehow, as though I were pretending to be an experienced mountaineer. Now, after days in these mountains, I cannot imagine walking without it. Travel changes your perspective on what matters. A water bottle becomes precious. Dry socks become a luxury. A warm bowl of soup can feel more comforting than almost anything in the world. Outside the lodge, the cold air stings my lungs. At more than 3,000 meters above sea level, the air here feels thinner and sharper than anywhere I have known. The mountains rise around the village like enormous shadows. Not hills, not ridges, but colossal walls of rock and snow disappearing into darkness. Our trekking group gathers quietly in the cold. People from different countries, different lives, different languages. And yet, here we all are, together beneath the same Himalayan sky, tightening backpack straps in silence. No one speaks very much this early. Perhaps the mountains encourage quiet. Or perhaps everyone is still half asleep. Lhakpa smiles at each of us as though waking before dawn in freezing temperatures is the most natural thing imaginable. That smile never seems forced, even after long days of climbing, even when some of us struggle with altitude, even when exhaustion leaves the entire group moving slowly and silently through the mountains. Always patient, always calm. On the first day of the trek, he explained the meaning of his name. In Sherpa tradition, many names are connected to the days of the week. Lhakpa means Wednesday. Ang means little. Little Wednesday, he told us with a grin. The name somehow suits him. There is something youthful and gentle about the way he moves through the world. Without guides like Lhakpa, many of us would probably never make it through these mountains. Soon we begin walking. At first, only the crunch of boots disturbs the silence. The trail climbs gradually upward beyond the village, disappearing into darkness between stone walls and frozen earth. Then, little by little, dawn begins. The Himalayas reveal morning slowly. A faint silver line appears along the horizon. Then pale blue. Then soft ash gray. Far above us, the highest snow-covered peaks catch sunlight first. Their summits glow gold, while the valleys remain trapped in cold shadow. The contrast feels almost unreal. Warm light touching frozen mountains, while we still walk through darkness below. As the morning brightens, the landscape transforms around us. The Annapurna Circuit crosses so many elevations and climates that it can feel as though entire continents have been compressed into a single journey. One moment the trail winds through dry, dusty slopes scattered with brittle shrubs. Later, it passes through greener valleys where moss clings to stone walls and ferns grow beside mountain streams. Clouds drift across the peaks, changing the colors constantly. Under direct sunlight, the mountains glow in shades of copper, pale brown, and slate blue. Then shadow arrives, and suddenly everything becomes silver and gray. The colors never stop shifting. Heather green bushes, dark blue rock, reddish earth, white snowfields resting impossibly high above the valleys, and everywhere prayer flags, blue, white, red, green, yellow. They flutter from rooftops, temples, suspension bridges, and lonely ridges high above the trail. Sometimes they appear faded, almost white, from years of wind and sunlight. Even the wind itself feels different here, cleaner somehow, as though it has traveled immense distances before reaching you. The trail continues upward, and hours pass. By mid-morning, the cold has vanished entirely. The high-altitude sun presses down with surprising force. At these elevations, the sunlight feels heavier, more direct. My shirt clings damply beneath my backpack. Dust settles along my sleeves. Each step sends small stones sliding beneath my boots. Eventually, the trail curves around a hillside, and suddenly, without warning, a Buddhist temple appears. It stands alone against the mountainside, as though it has grown directly from the earth. Its white dome rises above rough stone foundations stacked carefully against a hill. Bright orange paint catches the sunlight. Golden details shimmer near the spire. Behind it towers a massive Himalayan ridge wrapped in cloud. Dark stone, snow, immense silence. The scale is difficult to comprehend. The temple feels small and human, but the mountain behind it feels ancient and impregnable. I stop walking. So does everyone else. No one says anything. The only sound is wind moving softly through prayer flags. It is strange how these mountains rearrange your thoughts. Back home, life often feels crowded with concerns, appointments, plans, deadlines. But standing beneath peaks that have existed for millions of years, those worries begin dissolving under their grandeur. The mountains do not care about personal success, or schedules, or status. They simply exist. And that somehow feels comforting. We continue on. The trail narrows along steep slopes where loose gravel shifts beneath our boots. Far below, rivers cut pale lines through deep valleys. Every so often we pass other trackers moving in the opposite direction, faces sunburned, boots dusty. Everyone greeting one another with the same tired but genuine smile. There is a quiet understanding shared among people walking these mountains. By midday, we finally reach Pisang. The village appears gradually between trees and stone walls. Small lodges, prayer wheels, wood smoke rising into the thin air. After hours of climbing, even the sight of a simple wooden bench feels deeply comforting. Pisang is home to only a few hundred people, yet during trekking season it becomes a small resting point for travelers from all over the world. Without the Annapurna Circuit, very few outsiders would ever find their way here. Near one of the lodges stands a small wooden shop selling trekking supplies. Replacement gloves, maps, batteries, packets of instant noodles. A faded information board nearby warns about altitude sickness. The message is serious, but there's something unintentionally charming about its directness. If symptoms worsen, the sign advises in large letters, "Descend, descend, descend." We are still far from the highest point of the trek, Torong La. It rises far above us at more than 5,000 meters. The thought of climbing that high still feels difficult to imagine. Yet somehow, day by day, the mountains slowly teach your body what it can endure. That afternoon, I wander quietly through Pisang alone. The village paths twist between stone walls and weathered houses. Children run laughing through narrow alleys. An old woman spins a prayer wheel slowly with one hand, while sunlight warms the white wall beside her. Eventually, I stop before another Buddhist temple. Its walls are painted bright white. Wooden carvings beneath the roof are painted deep blue and dark red. Prayer flags flutter overhead. I've seen those flags constantly throughout the trek, tied to bridges, wrapped around poles, stretching across valleys, and sometimes hanging from lonely boulders high in the mountains. Seeing them now reminds me of the suspension bridge. It was several days earlier, a bright Himalayan morning. Above us stretched a sky so deeply blue it almost seemed impossible. The trail wound through green mountainsides dotted with shrubs and moss-covered rock. At one point, Lhakpa paused and pointed ahead. "Close now," he said. At first I saw nothing, only mountains. Then we rounded a bend, and suddenly the gorge appeared. The valley dropped away so sharply that my stomach tightened immediately. Far below, a river flashed silver between enormous rock walls. Stretching across the void was a suspension bridge. Long, narrow, swaying gently in the wind. Prayer flags fluttered along its steel cables. Lhakpa stood at the entrance smiling. "Enjoy the view," he said. I looked through the gaps between the wooden planks and instantly regretted it. The drop beneath us felt endless. Carefully, I stepped forward. The bridge shifted beneath my weight. A second step, then another. The steel cables creaked softly. The wind moved around us, and halfway across, something unexpected happened. The fear disappeared. Not dramatically, not all at once. It simply faded. In its place came an overwhelming calm. The kind of calm that arrives only when there's nowhere else you're meant to be. Above me stretched the endless blue Himalayan sky. Below, the river glittered through the gorge. The mountains surrounded us in every direction. The wind brushed softly against my face. And for a few moments, suspended high above the valley, I felt strangely weightless, like one of the prayer flags fluttering beside me. When I finally stepped onto solid ground again, I felt lighter somehow, as though I had left something behind on the bridge. Perhaps worry, perhaps noise, perhaps that constant feeling that life must always be rushing somewhere. Now, standing quietly in front of the temple in Pisang, I think again about that feeling. The stillness, the uncanny clarity these mountains create. I've never considered myself particularly religious, yet here in the Himalayas, surrounded by prayer flags and silence and impossible landscapes, I begin to understand why human beings search for spiritual meaning in the mountains. There is something about immense natural spaces that quiets the mind. The longer you remain here, the less important your ordinary worries begin to feel. I realize I've been standing here for a long time. The sunlight has softened. Evening is arriving. The sky above the mountains slowly fills with color: gold, crimson, pale blue, deep charcoal. Clouds drift above the peaks like brush strokes painting the sky. Cold air begins returning to the valley. And suddenly, my stomach growls. I had almost forgotten hunger entirely. Back at the lodge, warmth and conversation spill from the dining room. Trekkers sit bundled in jackets around long wooden tables. Steam rises from bowls of bhat: rice, lentils, vegetables. Simple food, perfect food. After a full day in the mountains, it tastes better than almost any meal I can remember. Someone laughs quietly near the stove. A pair of hikers compare blisters. Others study maps beneath dim lights while charging cameras and phones beside the wall. Outside, darkness settles across the Himalayas. Tomorrow we will climb higher still, toward Torongla, toward landscapes even harsher and more beautiful than these. But tonight that doesn't feel urgent. Fatigue settles gently over the room. One by one, people disappear upstairs. Voices grow quieter. The stove crackles softly. Eventually, I return to my room. The cold has already crept back into the wooden walls. I crawl deep into my sleeping bag and switch off my headlamp. Darkness fills the room. For a while, I simply listen. The muffled sound of wind outside. A faint creak somewhere in the building. Soft footsteps in a distant hallway. Then silence again. Gradually, even those sounds fade. The lodge grows still. I can hear the steady breathing of other travelers through the thin walls. Someone murmurs softly in their sleep. The sound is too distant to understand. And outside, somewhere beyond the dark village, prayer flags continue fluttering in the cold Himalayan night. I imagine them stretched between poles and rooftops beneath the stars, moving endlessly in the mountain wind. Blue, white, red, green, yellow. Tiny pieces of color suspended between earth and sky. The Himalayas themselves feel awake somehow. Not awake in the human sense, not conscious, but present, immense, breathing slowly through wind and silence. And lying there in the darkness, wrapped in warmth while freezing mountain air drifts outside, I begin thinking about how rarely life becomes truly quiet. Back home, there's always another screen, another message, another obligation waiting just beyond the edge of the moment. But here, high in the Himalayas, those things feel unimaginably far away. Up here, life narrows itself down to simpler rhythms. Walking, breathing, drinking water, watching the sky change color, following trails through mountains, sharing meals, sleeping deeply. And perhaps that is why these journeys stay with people for so long. Not because they are easy, not because they are comfortable, but because somewhere along the trail, beneath all the exhaustion and cold and altitude, life briefly becomes simple again. The mountains strip away distraction. They leave only movement, silence, sky, stone, wind, breath. And eventually, slowly, sleep begins pulling at me too. The darkness feels softer now. The sleeping bag warmer. My legs ache pleasantly from the long day of climbing. Outside, the wind continues moving through the prayer flags with a faint, papery whisper. The sound rises and falls gently, again and again and again, until it almost blends completely with the rhythm of breathing. And somewhere between those sounds, wind and breath, silence and distance, the Himalayas hold me and carry me into a deep, silent sleep.